Welcome to the latest version. I'm your host, Betsy Bush. What do you want the second half of your life to look like? If you're 50, you may just be approaching your life's midpoint. If you're 60, you could have another 30 years of productive living ahead of you. How can you make the years to come as fulfilling and rewarding as anything you've yet experienced? My guest today, Michael Clinton, has written the book for these times. Michael's book is Roar into the Second Half of Your Life Before It's Too Late, from Beyond Words Publishing. Michael is the former president and publishing director of Hearst Publications. He's also a photographer, a marathon runner, a private pilot, and so many other things. Michael, welcome to the latest version.
Thank you, Betsy. Great to be with you today and with all your listeners. Appreciate the invitation.
Great, thanks. There are so many different conversations at this moment around this idea of reinvention and reimagining oneself, heading into a period where we all thought, well, traditionally we should be, I don't know, in the rocking chair on the porch or something, but we're all in this. It's like, I don't want to do that. I've got energy, I've got my health, I've got time. Why are we all having this conversation right now? Do you think?
I think it started a few years ago as the, those famous boomers, of which I am one. I'm a younger boomer, but the boomers have a long history of reinventing everything, right?
That's right.
They've reinvented through their whole lifetime. And I think they are in the process of reinventing what a 50, 60, 70 plus year old life looks like. And, I think that the headline here is that the old construct is all being blown up. They don't want their father's retirement. They want to rewire and do the next thing. And many of them are launching businesses. The largest cohort of entrepreneurs are 55 to 64-year-olds.
I've heard that. Yes.
They've amassed a lot of wealth. There's still a lot of inequity in the world, but as you probably know, this generation is going to have the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world.
Right.
60 to 70 trillion dollars by in the next 25 years. So they have capacity. So they want to do things that are going to excite them, whether it's career or new lifestyle, or I say, why not build a house at 80? Or, why not, try something new at 70? So I think they're redefining everything. And I think the pandemic has really just amplified it.
Take us through your ROAR acronym, because I found it really, really interesting because you came to some really interesting ideas that I really identified with.
Yeah, thank you. The ROAR, which is a great action word just in general,
yes.
Right? Is an acronym for, the book is in 12 chapters, and it is, in 4 parts. So the R is reimagine yourself before others do it for you or circumstances do it for you, and reimagine your favorite future. So what is your future that you want? Based on where you are right now. The O is own who you are, where you came from, but also all your numbers, your health numbers, your financial numbers, your ultimate number, which is, do you have your stuff in order? Own your strengths and weaknesses, things like that. A is the action plan. There's a concept called life layering in the book, which is how you build on your experiences in your life, in your world. And the R is reassess your relationships, because holistically speaking, everything that we do, ultimately, it's the people around us, our family, our spouses, our partners, our community, that really are the ones that are the wind beneath our wings, so to speak, to get things done. So it's a sort of simple formula with a lot of flesh put in, obviously, to get to this manifesto.
The one I really identified with was own who you are, because I think a lot of us have spent our lives trying to fit in with the crowd. When we're in school, you want to wear the shoes every other kid is wearing, or in college, you want to run with the pack, or even in the workplace, you don't want to be the person who sticks out and is different too much.
Yeah. The thing that many years ago, I read a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, which sounds a little somber, but it was actually extremely enlightening. It was a hospice nurse who sat with, hundreds of people over the years. And the number one thing that kept resonating with all of her conversations was I wish I had been more true to myself, which is what you just said. I wish I had listened to my own North Star. I wish I had followed my path that I really wanted to follow, and that I didn't do what my parents or my spouse or my kids or my neighbors or whatever. And I think, that's hard to do. It takes courage, but it is the formula, I think, for a fulfilling and successful life, is to follow your own North Star.
And that's really where our value comes in, is our unique perspective, our uniqueness, period. If you're the person who is able to spot that one trend or spot that one thing that speaks to you as a unique person, that might be where your real value is. And yet a lot of people spend a lot of time suppressing that.
Well, I'll give you a great example. I interviewed 40 people in the book, all who made major life changes. And to your comment, one of my favorites was the guy named Mark, who was a Wall Street executive, MBA from Michigan, was having a very successful track run as a banker, investment banker. In his late 40s, he had this epiphany that he was not really doing what he really, in his young life, had wanted to set out to do. And he stepped out of the job. He went and got a degree in adolescent education, a master's degree, and he is now teaching math in the inner city schools. And he is happier than he's ever been. But, he was one of the fortunate, lucky ones, because he made the pivot in his late 40s and said, I need to do what is right for me. So I think these stories in the book, are meant to inspire people that you can do it too, regardless of where you are in your life.
How did you find those 40 people? Some of them had really inspiring stories to tell, and they were from all walks of life. I'm wondering, where did you find them, and what did you learn from them? What did they have to teach you?
It's a great question. The filter was 2 filters: 1, 45 plus, and 2, that you had to have made a 180-degree turn in your life in some form, career, lifestyle, personal, to put you onto a completely different path. So I knew some of the people because I had been inspired by them just in life, but I had hired an editorial assistant and asked her to go out and find people for me. And she did an amazing job finding individuals. And then I had word of mouth, for people who knew that I was writing the book. So it was very interesting. It all kind of happened organically. And someone would say, oh, I knew this guy who lived in Los Angeles, or, oh, I know this woman who, reinvented herself completely as a professor at Stanford University and had never taught before and only has an undergraduate degree. And she's like one of the most popular professors at Stanford. And, it just kind of grew organically. So I reached out to different people, and most everyone, with a few exceptions, were willing to tell their story because they were inspirational stories. So, that's how it happened.
A lot of us are living the lives that our 17 or 18-year-old selves chose for us, whether or not to go to college, which major, who your friends were. So much of our lives' paths are determined by the decisions that person made way back when. You were very lucky. Your 17 or 18-year-old self was very smart, and you knew that you wanted to go to college when, in fact, you were, I think, the first person in your family to go. You were a first-gen student, as it was.
Yeah, first-gen student. My parents were high school graduates, but there was really no higher education in the family. but my parents were also very tuned into cultural activities, and whether we went to museums or to every Friday we went to the library, and we were allowed to take 5 books out for the week, and it was a family ritual. And so they were very much exposed us to many things, and it was the words that I read in books that ultimately captured my imagination that there was something bigger out there. And my parents were great. They were encouraged us all to go to college, but they wanted us to follow our own path. And I remember my father once saying, if you want to be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger there is. So there was not, I found my path, and as did my siblings. And going to the University of Pittsburgh to study economics and political science was a huge eye-opener for me, just in terms of, impacting my future path. And so, yeah, education to me is a lot, as you know, there's a thread in the book about how important education is, regardless of where we come from. And there is a lot of money out there for adults who maybe gave up education. In fact, in the book, we did a survey we had 600 completed questionnaires from, adults from various walks of life. And the 2 biggest comments were, one, I wish I had done more to pursue a better education. The second one was, I would rethink who I married, which is a whole other book unto itself. But the education piece, you can go back to the university at 40, 50, 60. I'm a proud 60-something graduate of a new master's degree from Columbia University. And if you don't have your own money, there's a lot of money out there that funds adult education in whether it's college or university or certificates or Pell Grants. So there's really no excuse if you want to pick up that thread that you might have lost, or take a left turn and go do something else. One of the women in the book, who's in her 50s, was a book editor, and she went to medical school. And, she basically did it all through scholarships that she found. And she's in her early 60s now, and she's a doctor. So it's never late. It's never too late.
It's never too late. I also got a second undergraduate degree at Columbia, and I wonder if we didn't pass each other on the stairs at Lewis and Hall or something.
Right, walking through the quad with
That's
our
right.
sweatshirts on.
That's right, with the pennant in the backpack.
Exactly.
I love being back on campus because I just found it so energizing. I just loved that energy and the challenge that was like nothing else that I'd encountered in work life, which is,
sweating out a grade, you mean?
Studying for a test, writing papers. It was great. It was actually great fun, but I loved being back on campus because I feel like for a lot of us who were last undergraduates, maybe 40 years ago, there is a lot to learn. There's a lifetime of learning in between then and now. And the courses you maybe tried to avoid as an undergraduate are full of real treasures that I think can be better appreciated now.
Yeah, I think the lifelong learning concept is something that's thriving in higher education right now.
Yes.
And I'll go back to the boomers. They're really the ones driving it, because you may know that the number of college potential students over the next decade is going to drop dramatically.
Yes.
And so a lot of colleges are going to have some problems on the enrollment front, and they're trying to build continuing education programs. And it's the boomers who are really, the ones embracing that. Mm-hmm. So even if you go and take a few courses around the subject that really interests you, it's keeping that lifelong learning thing that is driving this new trend of the post-50 life.
Oh, absolutely. And you, all of these things need to be undertaken with intention. And I think you make that very clear, which is, it's not going to just happen to you. You have to be very intentional about what it is you want to do. And I took your experience becoming an accomplished photographer as one of these cases, and you build it into your life layering experience. Can you tell me a little bit about how you went about becoming the photographer that you are now?
Yeah, thank you. The life layering concept of integrating something into who you are is, and I'll use the photography. I had always been a photographer like everyone else who does, amateur photography, but I ultimately decided I wanted to go, knee deep, or I should say neck deep into the whole subject. So aside from learning photography and taking photography courses and learning about digital photography and teaching myself and going to classes, I also started to study photography. I started to go to photography auctions. I started to, learn about collecting photography. I started to learn about the great photographers. It ultimately led me to the acquisitions committee of the International Center of Photography here in New York.
Wow.
Now I'm on the board of trustees there and on their executive committee. I'm an executive VP of the board. And along the way, I ended up, through a friend, had a pop-up show of photography, and I did it as a fundraiser, which led to multiple more shows. And ultimately, I published my publisher that I worked with has published 8 books of my photography.
Wow.
So I sort of, over the course of, 10 years, all of this happened. And, I continue. So my layer of photography is very, very rich. And, I'm a collector and I'm on that ICP board and I still take photography, shoot photography. I'll have another photography book in the works at some point. And so, yeah, all in, go all in on the subject and build a rich layer and stay with it for a lifetime. And it is, don't worry what people think about, are you good, are you bad, are you, just go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah. I was really struck. It's not just, what f-stops and now I'm trying to think about the photography I learned, the field of focus,
Right.
But what makes a good photograph and
Right.
and the great photographers and studying the history of photography and so you have a very deep intellectual understanding of photography that maybe a hobbyist might not have. And that enriches your photography as other people see it, even if, they're unaware of your background. Clearly, that's something you're bringing to it, but it's that's really enriching your life as well.
Yes, it's true. And the other great thing about digital photography is that you just delete. You're not spending a fortune on film.
Yes, remember what it used to be like.
When I learned digital photography, I was like, whoa, this is like really good.
Yeah.
You can take thousands of pictures and decide which one you're gonna showcase. But yeah, I think that's the key, is that, you really go deep into a subject and you become the, if you will, resident expert within your group, your community. Everyone in my world knows that I know a lot about photography. And so they know I'm the guy to call if they want to, get into the topic in one way or another.
Yeah. You also call out a lot of us who spend a lot of time on our devices and, watching, there's so many shows to watch, and I shouldn't actually say this as a podcaster because there's so many podcasts to listen to, but let's be honest about the fact that a lot of that is just, it's enormous time suck, and you lose hours of time that you could be using to make your life better.
So guilty as charged. I'm on my device like everyone else in a constant kind of way. And, how much time can you spend scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and, all of the platforms? The challenge that I like to give, especially younger people, is to challenge them to put down all technology for 24 hours. And they look at me like, I just stepped off another planet. Like they can't even imagine it. And by the way, that's for all of us. And if you just put down all your devices and commit to no technology for 24 hours, first of all, that is what goes on in your mind is really great, because things start to surface and you start to think of things and see things. And I say to people, go take a walk in the park, have a meal with your friends, your family, and think about all the we spend on those devices, and how you can channel that time into one of these activities that we were talking about. So, photography, the photography example, if you think about X number of hours a week that you can spend towards your passion or what it interests you, it really has big meaning and impact, in your life. So technology is our friend, and it's also our detractor.
You're also very upfront about needing to take care of our health. And I think this is something we need to keep emphasizing, especially for this crowd that's moving. We want to have good years, right? When you're in the coming decades, and they're not going to be good decades if we don't have our health. And I know you're a marathon runner, but you're very clear about this.
Yeah, it's fundamental, right? It's probably the most fundamental thing that you have as you live longer. And so I like to use the phrase, we are all living longer as opposed to we're getting older, because it's just a flip of a word that has a lot of more relevant meaning. And as we live longer, there's an enormous amount that science has brought us to keep us strong and healthy. But most people, and I hate to say it to the men who are listening, but I think men are more guilty of this than women, is that they just don't pay attention to fundamentals like blood pressure and cholesterol and LDL and, heart rate and those kinds of things, because those are the sort of the foundation of it all. And then how do we, we can't as 50-year-olds eat the way we ate as 25-year-olds.
Yep.
We just have to think about our diet and fiber and all of those kinds of things. And so I think the health numbers are, critical to having a long and productive life. And other things like, I'm a 2-time skin cancer survivor. And so I'm diligent about getting the skin checked and making sure that there's nothing happening that I should be concerned about. And so it's knowing your body, and your body, when something's not working, and it's knowing, how to take care of yourself. All things come off of that.
Right.
All things come off of that.
Your book is filled with so much wisdom, and I always ask my guests for 3 pieces of advice that they would give to others who are kind of facing this, maybe this emptiness, thinking, I don't know what's going. I've had people say to me, I'm a few years from, I don't know what's going to happen, retirement. I haven't thought about it at all. What advice do you have for people who are facing a kind of a blank page? How can they start to explore that?
It's more common. That response is more common than not. Meaning the majority of people who you talk to say, I have no idea what I'm going to do, or I'll decide when I get there. And that is a bad formula, because in one instance, a woman that I interviewed, she said, I spent 3 years of my life trying to recreate what I had just left. And it was 3 years of wasted time, because that was then. And, now is now, and I need to find a different path, which she ultimately did. She was a high-powered executive in a corporation. Her new path is she mentors women who are mid-career in terms of how do they get to C-suite positions. And she's loving that new pathway for her. But what I found with most of the people who did the pivot in this book is they spent a full 1 to 2 years really going through the dissection of what mattered to them and what did they want to do next. And I'll share a personal story. When I knew I was about a year from stepping out of the day-to-day in my profession, I had made that decision, and I knew it would be about a year out. And my job was a very intellectually stimulating job, because I'm in the media and it's all about concepts and words and all of that. So I knew I needed something that was going to fill that gap. So that's when I started the master's program. So I was sort of in school in the last year of my day-to-day. And then when I transitioned out of the day-to-day, school was my intellectual challenging outlet. this master's program, which was 12 courses. And that was a really great segue for me. So you have to know what are the things that are important to you as an individual, and then put in the time and the brain power to start building the building blocks, and challenge yourself and challenge the traditional thinking, because the proverbial go out and play golf and hang out with the grandkids is good for about 6 months. And then you're like, okay, now what? And so I think that, we have the opportunity as 50, 60, 70 plus year olds to do many, many, many exciting new things that are not what is the traditional path. We just have to find what is it that turns us on.
Do you think COVID is getting more people on that path sooner? Are younger people reaching the conclusions that a lot of us might have come to at, mid-50s or 60 or something like that?
It is definitely impacting younger professionals in a more profound way. And they're thinking about, do I want to be in this career? Do I want to be in this company? You've heard the expression, the big quit. People who are leaving their jobs because they're saying, this existential moment has led me to that. Do I want to live in a big city? Do I want to opt out and go and work remote in a smaller town somewhere in a place around the country that interests me? Do I want to be with this person who I just have spent 18 months living with in four walls? And, is this really what I want my future to be? And I think younger people, in their 40s and younger have been much more nimble. But I think people in their 50s and 60s and 70s can do this too. I mean, it's a long arc and a construct. We box ourselves in with self-imposed ageism and so self-imposed things that are quote unquote supposed to be age appropriate. And what I would argue is you should be person appropriate. You should do, it's not unusual for a woman to have her first child at 50. There are many examples of it, or there are people who starting businesses at 60 or, starting a new love life at 70. And so, it's a person appropriate thing. So we cage ourselves and box ourselves in. The culture does it too in terms of expectation. And, what the Roar Manifesto is, fight against that and, reconstruct a different kind of future based on what you want. And that's really the message.
It's very inspiring, and I think for a lot of us who don't have role models in our own parents, and for a lot of us who are finding our own ways, making the path by walking, as it were, it's great to have some inspiring examples such as you've provided for us, Michael. It's a great book, and I've really appreciated reading it.
Thank you.
Right. Michael Clinton's book is Roar into the Second Half of Your Life Before It's Too Late, from Beyond Words Publishing. Michael, I want to really thank you for being with me today on the latest version.
Thank you so much. It was great to be with you, and I hope your listeners take some great lessons and value out of our conversation. So Thanks.
Thanks so much, Michael. Bye-bye.
Good.